Imagine this, a man is shot and killed in the middle of his hometown, in broad daylight, with at least 45 people watching. And yet, decades later, no one has ever been charged. This isn't the plot of a movie, it's the true story of Ken McElroy, the town bully of Skidmore, Missouri, whose reign of terror ended in a hail of gunfire that an entire town decided to forget. How could something like this happen? And what does it say about justice when a community takes the law into its own hands? For over 20 years, Ken Rex McElroy was more than just a resident of Skidmore. He was a force of nature that the small farming community couldn't escape. He was a big man, often weighing nearly 300 pounds, and he used his size and a notoriously short temper to intimidate everyone around him. His criminal record was staggering, with at least 21 felony charges filed against him over the years. These weren't minor offenses. We're talking about arson, assault, cattle rustling, and even statutory rape. McElroy seemed to have a sixth sense for manipulating the legal system. He was an expert at delaying trials, often for years at a time. He would intimidate witnesses, ensuring they either changed their story or refused to testify altogether. If that didn't work, he'd hire top-tier lawyers who could find loopholes and technicalities to get him off the hook. Out of all those charges, he was convicted only once, and even then, he managed to appeal it successfully. For the people of Skidmore, it felt like McElroy was completely untouchable. He would openly brag about his crimes, daring anyone to do something about it. He was known to drive around town with a collection of firearms in his truck, a constant, visible threat to anyone who might consider crossing him. The atmosphere in Skidmore was one of constant fear. Parents warned their children to stay away from him. Business owners were afraid to report his thefts. Farmers lost livestock and couldn't prove it was him, even though everyone knew. He was a shadow hanging over the town, a daily reminder that the justice system they believed in was failing them spectacularly. He wasn't just breaking the law, he was mocking it, and the people of Skidmore were forced to watch, feeling helpless and abandoned. This long, slow burn of resentment and fear was building up, year after year, setting the stage for an explosive confrontation. The breaking point finally came in 1980. The victim this time was Ernest Bo Bowenkamp, a 70-year-old grocer. The dispute started over something trivial. McElroy's daughter was accused of shoplifting a piece of candy from Bowenkamp's store. When Bowenkamp's wife confronted the girl, McElroy became enraged. He began a campaign of harassment against the elderly couple, making threats and lurking around their property. One evening, the situation escalated dramatically. McElroy, armed with a shotgun, confronted Bowenkamp in the street. According to witnesses, McElroy fired his weapon, hitting Bowenkamp in the neck. Miraculously, Bowenkamp survived the shooting. For the people of Skidmore, this was finally it. McElroy had shot a beloved, elderly member of their community in cold blood. Surely, this time, justice would be served. McElroy was charged with attempted murder, and at the trial, Bowenkamp bravely took the stand and identified him as the shooter. The jury found McElroy guilty. A wave of relief washed over Skidmore. It seemed their long nightmare was finally over. But their relief was short-lived. Despite the guilty verdict, McElroy's high-powered attorney immediately filed for an appeal and, to the town's absolute shock and horror, managed to get him released on bond. Ken McElroy was coming home. The man who had just been convicted of shooting an old man was now free to walk the same streets as his victims and the witnesses who testified against him. The news hit the town like a punch to the gut. The system hadn't just failed them, it had laughed in their faces. With McElroy back in town, the fear was thicker than ever. He was seen at a local bar, carrying a rifle and making not-so-subtle threats about what he would do to those who had crossed him. The people of Skidmore realized that if they wanted protection, they would have to provide it themselves. July 10, 1981. It was a hot, humid summer day in Skidmore. The news of McElroy's release had spread like wildfire, and the tension in the town was palpable. That afternoon, McElroy and his wife, Trina, drove into town in his green Chevrolet pickup. They went to the D&G Tavern, one of the few places he was still willing to go. But this time was different. As he sat at the bar, a crowd of men began to gather outside. It wasn't an organized mob with pitchforks, but a quiet, grim assembly of farmers, business owners, and ordinary citizens. Some reports say there were between 45 and 60 people present. After a tense time in the tavern, McElroy and Trina left and got back into their truck. They weren't going to get far. As they sat in the cab, on the town's main street, a volley of gunshots suddenly shattered the afternoon quiet. Bullets ripped through the truck's cab from different directions. Ken McElroy was hit multiple times and died almost instantly in the driver's seat. Trina, physically unharmed, screamed in horror. The reign of the town bully was over. What happened next is what makes this case so legendary. The town's main street was now a crime scene. The sheriff arrived to find dozens of potential witnesses. These were the very people who had lived in fear of McElroy for years. But when he started asking questions, he was met with a wall of silence. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. People who were standing just feet away from the truck claimed they were looking the other way or had suddenly ducked down to tie a shoelace. It was a collective act of amnesia. Trina McElroy identified one of the shooters, but her testimony was dismissed as unreliable due to the traumatic circumstances. The investigation went nowhere. The FBI was called in, but they too were met with the same impenetrable silence. A grand jury was convened, but not a single person would break the unspoken code. Despite the fact that the killing happened in broad daylight with an entire crowd watching, no one was ever indicted, let alone charged, for the murder of Ken McElroy. The shooters, whoever they were, had blended back into the community, protected by their neighbors. The town of Skidmore had passed its own sentence and carried it out. And then, as one, they agreed to forget it ever happened. The case officially remains open and unsolved to this day. The story of Ken McElroy in Skidmore, Missouri, leaves us with some deeply unsettling questions. What happens when the legal system repeatedly fails to protect its citizens? Can a community be justified in taking justice into its own hands? Some see the people of Skidmore as heroes who did what the law couldn't, remove a menace from their community. They argue it was a necessary act of self-preservation. Others see it as a terrifying breakdown of civilized society, a vigilante mob that committed murder and got away with it. There's no easy answer. The case forces us to confront the gray areas between law and justice, between order and survival. The silence of Skidmore has echoed for decades, a powerful testament to the desperation of a town pushed to its absolute limit. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't about who did it, but why an entire community would choose to carry a secret to their graves. What do you think? Was this vigilante justice or a collective crime? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into incredible true stories. Until next time,